Hello, this is H.G. Tudor. Thank you for the many questions that I have received, which have been of particular interest in response to my recent video inviting people to ask me certain questions that they would like the answers to. So, here we are with part 1, and our first question is from Funda, who doesn't say where she is, and her question is, I have threatened my narcissist with the police, and I told him that I told the police everything about his violence and threats against me. I wonder if that stopped the narcissist, and if he would be afraid of ever bothering me again. First of all, you would probably be able to determine whether your admission and report to the police stopped the narcissist, because if you have not heard anything further from him, it is likely that it has. Whether this would prevent a narcissist from continuing in certain threats and violence towards you is very much dependent upon the school of narcissists that you're dealing with, whether lesser, mid, or greater. You also have to look at the context in which this occurred. Was this within the relationship? Was it afterwards? Any interaction that follows outside of the formal relationship is a hoover, and as I have mentioned previously, in order for there to be a hoover, there has to be a hoover trigger, therefore you have to enter one of the spheres of influence, and if you do so and there is a hoover trigger, the hoover execution criteria have to be met. Accordingly, if you have not recently entered his spheres of influence, there's no hoover trigger, therefore there can be no hoover. If you have, and he has not hoovered you by being violent towards you or issuing threats, then there is a set of criteria, some of which you may not know about, that has resulted in him instinctively not wanting to hoover you by way of this violence, by way of these threats. The fact that you've reported him to the police is but one of those criteria. Generally speaking, all things being equal, a lesser would largely be unconcerned by a report to the police because he does what he wants and he thinks in the very short term, and he operates through a very knee-jerk reaction. A mid-range narcissist would think twice about doing anything because he would be concerned about the damage to the facade. Whilst he has no sense of accountability and would regard it all as your fault, he would have enough cognitive function to recognise that a report to the police could cause problems for him vis-à-vis the facade and also his liberty. And therefore, it is likely to halt a mid-range narcissist in his tracks. With regard to a greater narcissist, a greater would not be so stupid as to leave anything attributable to him. He may bide his time, allow things to settle down, and issue such threats, not directly towards you, but follow up on them through alternative channels, so that you would know that the action has come from him, but you would not be able to prove it. In terms of you being afraid of your narcissist ever bothering you again, it's very simple. If you impose a robust no-contact regime, you reduce the opportunities for there to be hoover triggers, although you cannot completely exclude them because he will just happen to think about you, and thus you enter the sphere of influence. Then, as I have explained earlier, if there is a hoover trigger, then it depends on the criteria. If you make it very difficult for him to hoover you in any way, he does not know where you are, he's blocked, you've changed numbers, then you reduce the risk of him ever bothering you again. But as I've repeatedly explained to people, you can never say there will ever be a hoover again, but there is much you can do to reduce the risk. Our second question comes from Texas, and Rosie asks, hello, my ex-husband has been the subject of my no contact for a year. He emailed me recently and wrote, hi, can I tell you something? Rosie would like my opinion on this. It's very straightforward, Rosie. This is a hoover. And first of all, why is it that he's able to email you? Has he not been blocked? Perhaps he's emailed you from somewhere, an alternative account that you were not able to block. But if not, get this account blocked And certainly, if you ever see an email that comes from him or from someone you don't recognise, resist the temptation to read it, because this will cause your emotional thinking to surge. And this risks you engaging in further activity that will draw you back to the narcissist. He's hoovering you. He wants you to get in touch with him. He's awaiting a positive response from you, because if he receives that positive response, that will also act as a hoover trigger, and the fact that you've responded in a pleasant way means that he will feel that he's pushing on an open door, and therefore it will invite a further hoover. This is all it is. There is nothing you need to hear from him. He's a narcissist. Get out and stay out. The next question comes from Denise. She asks, why did my mid-range boyfriend, who is a narcissist and 60 years old, let his new intimate partner primary source become Facebook friends and exchange phone numbers with his ex-wife, who is 56 years old, and his 2 daughters, who are in their 30s? While I had a relationship with a narcissist, none of these people acknowledged my existence. The reason for this is that he wants to draw the daughters into his world with the IPPS. They are in a golden period. He feels that she's under such suitable control, as is the ex-wife, that he is content for the new IPPS to be drawn into his existing world of ex-wife and daughters. It's part of him binding the new IPPS closer to him by allowing this access. Why did he not do it with you? Quite possibly that he felt that the control over you was such that doing so would be problematic. It might have been that he feared that his control over his daughters and ex-wife was such that they might disclose information to you that would ruin the golden period with you. But essentially, it was based upon his needs, his need for control, his need to continue to obtaining fuel from you. It was nothing to do with whether you're a good person or a better person or a worse person than the new IPPS. It is all about matching his needs. The next question comes from Anna, who asks, would I ever develop a relationship with a super empath who knew what I was? Would there be any circumstances where this could occur? For example, a secret friendship separate from my main network. The super empath would not know what I was. They would not work out beforehand, and therefore any relationship with that individual would already be in place prior to any potential revelation that they might obtain, which would come, if at all, post-disengagement or post-escape. Karen, who is from Philadelphia in the United States, asks, does methamphetamine abuse make narcissism worse, or does it create it? First of all, it does not create it. Does it make it worse? Alcohol and drugs actually act as a fuel substitute. And that is why when you get certain narcissists who have a reduction in their fuel matrix and a reduction in their provision of fuel, they may well turn to these essentially coping mechanisms, because the impact of them provides them with something analogous to the fuel. And therefore, in a sense, it does not make the narcissism any worse, because the narcissism is already there. It might make the effects of the behaviour of the narcissism worse, because the methamphetamine may disrupt the relationship, it may prevent that person from working, they may have financial problems as a consequence of that, which all then have a knock-on effect upon the relationship. But in itself, it does not create narcissism, and nor will it make it any worse. Our next question is from Sabrina, and she is from Braga in Portugal. And Sabrina very kindly thanks me for my work. You're most welcome. She asks, how can I make my best friend of a 12-year-long friendship realise that she's being manipulated and emotionally abused by her mother? Just to inform you, I'm aware I can't tell her that her mother is a narcissist. If someone that did to me, I think she's crazy. Can you help me with that? Well, in essence, you're right. Trying to say to somebody that another person is a narcissist is is invariably very difficult, because those people who are ensnared, the fact of their ensnarement suggests and confirms that they do not know what they're dealing with, and they do not know about narcissists or narcissism. However, where you want to assist somebody in this way, and where it is a best friend who's got a situation with her mother, you can't tell her what to think. She has to work it out for herself. She has to understand and realise. And therefore, sometimes it is better to approach it from the position of explaining, when your mother does this, do you see it as controlling, or do you see it as abusive? And invite her opinion. Don't say to her, your mother does this, that means she is controlling. Invite her to think about it. You could tentatively suggest some of my work to her, not by saying, read this and it will tell you that your mother is a narcissist, or read this, it will tell you that your mother is an abuser, but rather you would be better countenancing it by explaining, I've been watching your interaction with your mother, and I only raise this with you because I care about you as my friend. I have some concerns about the way that she interacts, and I wondered if you picked up on this. I sometimes see that her behaviour suggests to me that she's controlling. What do you think about this? And I thought this article might be of interest to you. And then leave her with it. Let her reach the conclusions. Gently provide the material to her. Do not be prescriptive. Don't tell her what to think. Don't give her the conclusions, but rather make the suggestion and allow her to come to her own conclusion through her own reading and consideration. Next question is from Ash, who is from the southwest of the United Kingdom, and she loves my videos. Thank you very much. My question pertains to your insatiable need for fuel. After playing the Phantom for so long and hiding your narcissism during real-life interactions, well, I would say I don't necessarily hide it, because the whole point of the illusion that's created through seduction is part of narcissism. But I understand the point that you're making. How does it feel for me, then, to receive genuine admiration for actually being yourself and being genuine? Helping those poor codependents is a moral good, I'm sure. But the fuel they must provide must be very sweet indeed. How does it compare to the thrill of the chase? So in essence, I think what you're asking me is, what is the similarity, how does it feel when I am assisting people with my work, with them knowing that I'm a narcissist, and their responses? How does that compare to the people where they don't know about what I am? In essence, does it feel good to help? Whether I help somebody through the work that I do, through my blog, through consultations, through my videos, whether I help somebody in real life by lending them money, or helping an old lady cross the road, or picking the fluff off their lollipop, their reaction is the same. It's fuel. Therefore, when I receive an email from one of my readers saying, "Dear HG, your work is the best, it's helped me and it's saved my life," though that's positive fuel. It doesn't come from a potent source, because that person is a tertiary source. They're a reader. I don't know them, they don't know me. It's provided in the written word, which is the lowest quantity of fuel one receives, because I see the words, but I don't see any reaction from the reader. I don't see the look in their eyes. I don't hear the tone. I don't see the body language. I don't see the expression. And it's a one-off hit. Compare that to somebody who would thank me in person. For instance, the little old lady who I've helped across the road, she's also a tertiary source, so the potency is just the same as the reader. The quantity of the fuel will be slightly higher, however, because I am proximate to her physically, so I see her wrinkled eyes light up because she's been helped across the road by a gentleman, and that she smiles, and her thank you, and the words and the tone that are used, so she provide more fuel, and again it's a one-off hit. So ultimately, the fact that I might help tens of thousands of people and they express their thanks is lots and lots of little dollops of low potency, low quantity fuel, and would be no different from a similar situation to that in real life. The fuel is all determined by the potency, which is whether it's tertiary, secondary or primary source, the quantity, which is the method of delivery. Is it in writing? Is it down the telephone? Is it on Skype? Is it in person? And then the frequency. Is it 2 hours of being in that person's company where the fuel flows for all of that time, or is it a one-off hit for 10 seconds? Amy from Indiana in the United States asked me, which school of narcissists is most likely to cheat? Well, in essence, none are more likely than the others. Do all narcissists cheat? They do. Of course, by cheat, you are probably thinking of in the sexual or physical sense. But narcissists will cheat in an emotional sense, in a financial sense, in an intellectual sense. So cheating takes many forms. So a lesser or a mid-range or a greater, none of them are more likely to cheat than the other, because the sense of entitlement remains the same. Of course, you might think that a greater, who does not need the residual benefits of his wife, but purely the fuel, would feel more readily able to cheat, because if that results in her going, he can find another wife very easily because of his charm, his magnetism, his good looks, his wealth, all the various things that are associated with that. Whereas with a lesser, you might think he'd be less likely to cheat because it would be harder for him to find a replacement. However, of course, the lesser has no awareness. He also has such a huge sense of entitlement and lack of accountability that he will do whatever he wants and howsoever he pleases. Because, of course, he isn't cheating. His wife made him do it, didn't she? Because it always has to be her fault. So, in essence, there is no school of narcissists which is more likely to cheat than another. Following on a similar theme is Kimberly, who's from Louisiana in the United States, who asks, hello HG, is a mid-range the least likely to cheat of the three? No. Why do some narcissists remain faithful? Well, invariably they don't. And the reason is you probably don't know that they remain faithful. You'd like to think that they have, or if they have done so in a sexual or physical sense, they will not have done so in an emotional, intellectual, or financial sense. All narcissists cheat in some form. She also goes on to ask, does the mid-range actually love their children? My experience shows that there seems to be genuine love and concern, or is this just another well-played illusion? Seems to be genuine. There's your answer, seems. The mid-ranger is all about the facade, all about, I am a good person, really. They genuinely think that they are good people. The lesser may not bother with the children. He gets on, or she gets on, with doing what they want. The mid-ranger sees instinctively the value in being seen to care for the children, seen to appear to love them. It maintains that facade of being a good family man, or the doting mother. However, those children are just appliances, little mirrors, there to extract fuel from, there to obtain residual benefits in certain instances, there to sequestrate the achievement of the child and pass it off as their own. She's a good athlete because I taught her. He does really well at school because he's got my brains, etc., etc. They do not love their children. No narcissist loves their children. They will say they do, and they will give the appearance of doing so. But what's really happening is it is just a part of the carefully manufactured illusion once again. Diana asks me a question, and she is from the Chicagoland area, and she explains that she is a dancer in a club, and she's looking for revenge on her narcissistic ex-friend who's ruined her passion. She explains she's been no contact and has been silent for 6 months. But knowing how this predator stalks from past experience, would it be fair to say that she's stalking my YouTube through Googling my full name? Well, she may well be doing so. She's a friend, therefore you are a non-intimate secondary source to her. That means she will not put as much effort in with regard to you as she would with a romantic partner. Is she stalking you? Again, depends. As explained earlier in this video, is there a Hoover trigger? And if there is, does the Hoover execution criteria meet with satisfaction so that a Hoover occurs? If so, she may well Google your name and be stalking your YouTube. But she might also be driving past where you live if she has that information, or finding out where you are. I would say that in terms of seeking revenge on her, you would be best placed by maintaining your no contact and keeping away from her. And possibly with time, your passion for what you were doing will return. If you have completed no contact and it's been solid for those last 6 months, your emotional thinking has probably dropped. And therefore, if you were minded to engage in some kind of revenge campaign, you could read my book Revenge, which would set out detail there. But you have to remember, it is not for everybody. You have to get yourself into a particular position before you can take requisite action. Next question comes from Julie, who's from Michigan in the United States. Hello HG, I just watched your YouTube video about future faking. The video concern being, I will never hurt you. Made me think of the phrase, I'm not that guy, in reference to somebody who previously hurt you. Would this be an equal type of phrase used by a narcissist? Yes. I am curious as to what a narcissist means by statements like this. Well, what he's doing is, as a creature of expedience, doing what is the most appropriate thing for him in that moment. He is maintaining his facade by creating this illusion of being a caring and decent person that is not going to harm you in any way. He is saying these things to appeal to your empathic traits of being honest and decent and kind and having a strong moral compass to draw you in. He genuinely thinks that he will not hurt you, but it's only in that moment. And if you were ever to revisit him by saying, after he'd hurt you, but you said you weren't like that guy, and you are that guy, of course, you would be saying that hurt and upset, and therefore you would be issuing challenge fuel. And his response would be, of the first line of the narcissist's twin lines of defence, he would deny that he ever said that he was not that guy. And that would be done to preserve his superiority, to provoke you into getting upset, so that you provide him with more fuel. Gold asks a number of questions, one of which is, why would your kind stop trying to get fuel from somebody that you knew you couldn't manipulate anymore? Why would you quit and take your ball and go home rather than exert your superiority to win them back? Well, again, this would depend upon the circumstances and the relevant school of narcissist. A lesser would break off because instinctively they would realise that they're not getting what they want, and therefore instinctively he would realise that there is no point flogging a dead horse. If he cannot manipulate that person to gain fuel, it becomes a redundant action. He may well be getting wounded as a consequence of the refusal by the appliance to play ball, and therefore he has to take his ball home with him. It very much depends on the school of narcissist. A greater would relish the challenge. The desire would be there to break the appliance into providing fuel, so it could be another conquest on the part of that greater narcissist. A mid-ranger would also look to apply effort for some time, but if there is no reward arising from it, if there is no fuel coming, and also they are risking being wounded, the mid-ranger will break off also. So essentially, because narcissists like to conserve energy, they instinctively need to avoid wounding, and we do not like to engage in redundant acts. If an appliance is malfunctioning and not doing as it ought to, some narcissists will apply effort for a while, depending upon their school. Others will bail out straight away. Others will bail out after a short period of time. But it's all predicated on ensuring that the narcissist needs are met. And if they are not, the narcissist will not apply too much resource to rectifying that situation. It's far easier to throw that broken appliance to one side, go and find a new one, and then maybe hoover the previous one in accordance as usual with whether there is a hoover trigger and the hoover execution criteria are met. Chris has a question, and he's from Melbourne in Australia. He asks, my narcissistic ex told me he deliberately tried to hurt me repeatedly. Is there any way he can develop or learn object constancy permanence? Short answer, no. Are narcissists capable of trusting others, especially after they feel as though they have been betrayed? No. We are inherently paranoid about those around us. The extent of that paranoia differs between school of narcissist. but also heavily dependent upon the fuel level. If fuel is low, and for instance you have a lesser narcissist, then the whole world is against him. They're all arseholes. Everybody's out to get him, and he'll lash out at people repeatedly, trying to stop them bringing him down. You can't get rid of that paranoia, that lack of trust. Of course, there are degrees of trust that exist in relationships between people, but ultimately the narcissist does not fully trust anybody else. And the third question from Chris: does couples counselling or therapy help heal a relationship with a narcissist? No. Indeed, it may cause you to continue to engage in circumstances which are not good for you. The narcissist will manipulate the situation to his advantage, either by lying about what is being discussed so as to make it seem your fault, to dupe the therapist, or even sometimes achieves that. Couples counselling is not going to resolve the issue. The way you resolve the issue, where you have a relationship with a narcissist, is you get out and you stay out. And couples counselling or therapy is just going to prolong the misery for you. And if you listen to the video, "But I Can Change," that is expanded on in greater detail. So that concludes part 1 of answering questions for people. So if your question was not amongst those that I touched on, or was not answered, keep listening and looking out for further parts which will follow, as it may well be included in there. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for listening.